A new era of governance. The genesis of the Indian Councils Act of 1861. The year 1857 witnessed a cataclysmic uprising that shook British rule in India. This upheaval, often referred to as the Sepoy Mutiny, forced the British Crown to introspect on its administrative policies. The aftermath saw the dissolution of the East India Company and the formal transfer of governance to the British Crown. At the helm of this transformative period was Lord Canning, the Governor-General of India. Tasked with restoring order, Canning recognized the need for a more inclusive administration. This led to the enactment of the Indian Councils Act of 1861, a landmark legislation. The act aimed to introduce Indian participation in governance, albeit under the Crown's control. By introducing legislative councils with limited Indian representation, the British sought to create a safety valve for burgeoning Indian nationalism. Restructuring power. Key provisions of the Act. The Indian Councils Act of 1861 introduced changes to streamline administration and consolidate British control. One significant change was the restructuring of the Governor-General's Council, the apex executive body in British India. The Act expanded the council, introducing a new system of portfolios, with each member assigned responsibility for a specific department. This aimed to enhance efficiency and specialization within the administration. Another pivotal aspect was the expansion and reconstitution of the Legislative Council. The 1861 Act broadened the council's membership, allowing for the inclusion of Indians for the first time. The nomination of Indian members to the Legislative Council remained the prerogative of the Governor-General. While their inclusion marked a symbolic shift, their influence on policy-making remained limited. A voice, though, muted Indian representation and its limitations. The inclusion of Indians in the Legislative Council was carefully circumscribed to ensure continued British dominance. The nominated Indian members, often chosen for their loyalty to the Crown, were not representative of the diverse Indian populace. Furthermore, the Legislative Council's powers remained largely advisory. While it could debate legislative proposals, the final decision rested with the Governor-General. Despite these limitations, the presence of Indian voices in the legislative sphere had a profound symbolic impact. The council became a site for nascent nationalist sentiments to find expression. This nascent political consciousness would have far-reaching consequences in the decades to come. The limited representation, coupled with the Governor-General's overriding powers, ensured that the Act primarily served British interests. Section 4. Decentralization and its discontents, shifting sands of authority. The Indian Councils Act of 1861 introduced elements of decentralization within a framework of continued imperial control. The Act restored legislative powers to the presidencies of Madras and Bombay, which had been stripped of their legislative autonomy. This move aimed at easing the administrative burden on the central government and allowing for greater regional responsiveness. However, the decentralization envisaged by the Act was limited in scope. The Governor-General retained ultimate authority over all legislative matters. The British Secretary of State for India, a newly created position, had overarching control over Indian affairs. This ensured that all decisions, even those taken at the provincial level, were subject to scrutiny by the imperial authorities in London. Section 5. The Long Shadow of 1861. Legacy and Limitations. The Indian Councils Act of 1861 cast a long shadow on the political landscape of British India. The Act, while driven by the need to consolidate British control, inadvertently sowed the seeds of future change. The introduction of Indian representation in the legislative councils, however limited, marked a significant departure from the past. The Act's emphasis on decentralization, though circumscribed, paved the way for greater regional autonomy. The restoration of legislative powers to Madras and Bombay marked the first steps towards a more federal structure of governance. The Act's provisions ensured that ultimate authority remained with the Crown. In conclusion, the Indian Councils Act of 1861, while strengthening colonial control, set in motion forces that would contribute to India's journey towards self-governance.